Welcome, everybody. Another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. We got the band back together. Kellen's back in business again, and we're here for one more week, and then Jim will be gone next week. So, what are we going to do? We're do the best we can here. Good to see everybody. My Marty and Kellen. What have you been doing? What's been going on?
Back in the swing of things. So, listening to some trouble, but other things that have been spinning in my world. So this just arrived this week. This is the brand new release from, pull it out of the case here so we don't get too much glare going on. This is the new release from Aldridge. If anyone thought that my Our City or License was a little bit too much pagan poetry slam, this is going to be also on my end of year list, but it's in that sort of vein of like pagan black metal. So anyway, a new release from Aldridge entitled For Death, Glory, and the Gods I Cry. What else? Another new release that came in. Man, we got the promo for this one, and it's kind of been a album I've been obsessing over. So this is the new release from Ingurgitating Oblivion off of Willow Tip Records. Ontology of Naught is what it's titled. But we'll just move on from this release because I've talked about that. It has definitely got me down a different non-metal sort of rabbit hole. So this is a little bit more on the prog side of things. Chase to the Edge from Yes. And man, I haven't listened to this record for a long time, but I pulled it off the shelf. One of those formative high school records for me when first time I heard it. Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. So that Ingurgitating Oblivion is a trip. So those definitely kind of taken me off the just brutal death metal side of things. And then I did show up on Saturday to watch Logan's High on Fire stream. So I pulled, yes, Blessed Black Wings off the shelf and found this one again. So anyway.
Was that your number one, Kellen? We were all sharing the number one. What was your?
I mean, for me, it's between this and Thieves.
Yeah.
But I know it was. I bounced. I'm have to catch up. I think I left you at Stinks for the Divine, where I was cursing Greg Fettleman for ruining that record for me. So,
I figured that was intentional.
Yeah,
where you left the band,
like,
right?
I need to leave now. So anyway, that's what I've been spinning, and happy back with you guys this week.
Good to see you. Speaking of Logan, he's back.
Hey.
Go check out his High on Fire deep dive with Chris over at Depeche Commode. It's on the Metal and Beer Snob channel. They went at it for a long time, showed a bunch of rarities and some cool stuff. And their best one to me is the debut.
The debut was up there for me.
I love the debut. I think it's a great album.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what you been spinning? What you been up to?
Yeah, outside of High on Fire, I will say this week has been absolutely crazy busy. I don't know what's been going on, but it was nice. It's nice to be able to take a break and actually, sit back and talk about music. So for a 2024 album that I've been spinning, I got it queued up to share. I've been really diving into this new Pyron album a bit. It's just been a crazy, hectic, kind of fucked up listen. I don't really know how you would, describe this band. They're like technical death metal if they were also trying to be some kind of like avant-garde Jesus Lizard like noise rock band. It's a bit all over the place and kind of hard to digest. To me, it's like, swallowing glass through the ear holes, kind of. But sometimes it's just what you're in the mood for. So that's been, scratching that itch. And then, the High on Fire really did take over a lot of what I was listening to. But after the fact, I actually was in the mood for sleep. So I've been spinning a little bit of, new sleep and old sleep.
That album is not bad. I did check it out when it came out.
That's got 2 riffs on it?
It's got 3.
It's actually a bit more. It's a bit more. It's actually pretty good.
There's 6 songs and 3 riffs between the 6 of them. and only 10 minutes of bong, sound clips, sound
Bong
bites.
gurgles.
bong rips. So they really start to branch out, kind of. But I'm a sucker for this band and their sound. So
Is
spinning
that
this.
marijuana not or what's
Yeah, Marijuana's theme is on here.
Yeah.
Also a Giza Butler, and
Yeah, I heard a few off that one. Like, I
Yep.
think really that's the only one I can tolerate. There's just not enough variation of their older stuff for me.
you know what's good? The inner sleeve is just a breakfast where you can see all the Black Sabbath members. Like there's, I believe.
Oh, nice. Nice.
I was gonna say it's a traditional English breakfast too.
Mhm. Complete with it, with everything that makes sleep. And then this is a band. I know I'm not alone. I know I've heard Marty talk about this band, but I always revisit this every now and then to try to crack it and understand and to like it. And it's mainly centered around the vocals not clicking with me. And this is that classic doom, supposedly Cathedral. As
Oh,
we hear, so yeah, this is a weird, just all over the place kind of mess of an album, and like the vocals are like almost the defining characteristic and really what makes me want to listen to it, but then at the same time, that it makes me not want to listen to it. So
Mhm.
I don't know what to do with this thing. Yeah, Chris, I was actually with you at that show. I don't know if you remember that or
That's
not.
what it says. Logan and I saw sleep.
Oh, okay. Well,
Reading is fundamental, children.
reading is.
I love that
skip
record,
your
man.
class. Don't skip
I
your
love
class.
that record. Ride, that's a great song.
Oh,
man.
you do like this one?
Oh yeah, I do. It is
Yeah,
weird,
Chris.
but it's awesome.
It
Yeah,
is.
everybody that's been asking, Alan and his family are doing good. They're just out of power. A lot of people around them didn't do so good, but Alan and family are. The Colsons are fine.
They're still out of power?
They're still without power.
That's
Yep.
crazy. That's man.
Sorry to interrupt you, by the way.
No, you're good. That's
you're not.
worth that's worth updating people about.
Yeah, I see people asking in the chat. I had to say it before I forgot.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, I realized so I don't own any actual Trouble, but this is the closest I got. Trouble adjacent. This is the debut from the Skull. For Those Which Are Asleep. Definitely hits some of the highlights we're about to talk about for sure. This contains, I think, 3 members of the classic Trouble lineup. Mainly Eric Wagner on vocals is the main thing. So that's what I've been spending.
All right. Jim, good to see you, man. What's been going on? You guys made it through the hurricane, no problem.
Nah, man, I had no issues. Like I said, I'm on the Atlantic side, and I definitely think Helene messed up inland states way more than Florida, except for the Big Bend. It definitely devastated Cedar Key, which is a shame. It's a cool little town that I wanted to visit, but won't be going there for a while. Hopefully they're all okay. But anyway, back to the metal. Of course, this, which led me to this, which led me to this, which led to this, and then to this.
You went on a dive.
yeah.
Yeah, man. Obviously, I love Trouble, man. Like ever since I heard, when before it came out, I saw the video for Psychotic Reaction in 1990, and I immediately went out and bought everything I could find of theirs. And so I'm a huge Trouble fan. Have been for years. They started to they lost me after these records, after Manic Frustration, but I'm never too many weeks away from spinning a Trouble record. This band means a lot to me, so very excited about talking to him tonight, and I actually did spin at least some of all of these over the course of the week. And for something a little completely bizarre and different, I bought some Wendell Williams.
Nice.
Oh, that's right. And Marty, I know you know this one with Gene Simmons producing it, man.
Yeah. Yep.
What a weird record this is.
I
man.
bet. I've never heard it, but I can imagine.
What?
Never heard that one. No.
You are
You
not.
know,
A
I've
Kiss
never even
fan.
heard. I've never even heard a Plasmatics record
Dude,
other than songs and videos.
You
That's
better.
it.
You're gonna have to throw away all of those Kiss characters in your basement. All of them go in the trash. You
Yeah.
are not a true fan. Gene Simmons put his name on this.
Well, he
and
wanted
you
to
have
put
not heard
something else on that too. I'm sure.
it. Yeah. Lyrics are not great, but Wendy O. Williams' voice is awesome. She's got a great vocal, man. She's got a great vocal. So anyway, yeah. So
Yeah, I knew that, Jay. Yeah.
That's been my listening, and it also like she does covers with Lemmy, and they say that part of the reason the Motorhead lost Fast Eddie was because she did Stand By Your Man with Lemmy.
Yeah.
That's what it puts them off. But they do a Jailbait cover online. You can find it online. Live version. She did a bunch of stuff with Lemmy. So
Yep.
another weight in my heart is hanging out with the former god of rock and roll, not metal, not punk. Let me hate if you put him in anything else. All right. So, but yeah, that's it for me.
Right on. Well, coming off a week of a lot of Riot, so I've been playing some catch up, and I kind of went the opposite direction of that. And this has been sitting in a pile for a long time, but a later Blood Duster record. I think it's a self-titled. Fun record. This is a fun band. Totally fun band. Grind with some Southern influences, a lot of humor, a lot of perverse humor. The collage through the middle of this isn't something I'm going to show. A lot of penises for some reason. And this is funny. Everybody on here knows I like Doom. But I'm really picky. I'm picky, but I don't know why this band is always connected for me, and they're weird, they're repetitive, they're super unique, and I dig me some Reverend Bizarre. This is Harbinger of Metal. I also have this on vinyl. Great. They end the album with a doomed out cover of Burzum's Dunkelheit. Finnish band, which are broken up. They are no more. This is a great record, and Ben sent me these CDs, and this is one I did not have and spun it for the first time. So Long Suckers. I think this is their last album. It's a 2 CD set. First disc 3 songs, the second one 4 songs. It's just a lot of repetition. I love the vocals. I love the bass tone. You could tell he's playing through a Rickenbacker, and they kind of lull you into a trance with this repetition, and then they hit with these tasty stoner riffs that are just so cool and so tasty. And then you've got this weird sacrilegious sardonic humor mixed in with the whole thing. It's just, they're one of those bands. I think I'm missing like one thing from them, one or two, one for sure. I don't know. I don't listen to them all the time, but when I'm in the mood, that's what I want to listen to. So, yep, that's what I've been spinning. And of course, a lot of Creator 2 leading up to this as well, but that was a week or so ago. But we're here tonight to discuss this album, as Jim has already shown. The debut Trouble album, which was just called Trouble. And I think later on down the road, it ended up taking on the Psalm 9 name. Obviously, they put out, I think their 4th record is also called Trouble. So maybe that's where they decided to go. I don't know if it was a fan decision to call it Psalm 9 or what. On later pressings, it says Psalm 9. So
it was like an 88 release. And then from there on, they started calling it Psalm 9. Yeah.
Right. And for those who aren't familiar, Sue was on with us on Friday. We did a deep dive into this catalog. But if you're still new to it, Trouble is an American doom metal band from Aurora, Illinois, formed in 1981. They are often considered one of the pioneers of doom metal and have been referred to as one of the genre's big 4 alongside Candlemass Pentagram and St. Vitus. The band created a distinct style, taking influences of British heavy metal bands as Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, and psychedelic rock of the 60s. The first two albums, Psalm 9 and The Skull, are cited as landmarks of doom metal. So, first impression. We'll start with the youngest guy first. Obviously, he says he doesn't own any trouble. So, was
Yep.
this the first time hearing this album?
Yeah, it was. You guys, this stream got me. This is why it's here. This is why this album club is so fun. It finally gets like I've known of this band and known of this album, but I don't know. I just never gave them the time of day, and who knows why? Leave the hall, as you could say.
Well, your age is to blame. It's okay.
There we go. As long as I have an excuse.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've definitely flirted with picking this up, and as I showed earlier, I've listened to adjacent releases like the Skull album, and actually I saw this band before Eric passed back in 2019, and they played The Tempter. So I was aware of at least one song from this debut, but man, upon first listen, this is very reminiscent to me hearing that Omen album that you picked, Marty, for the first time. It was just like just immediate like shock and awe of just how kick-ass and like just classic sounding this album is.
Both Metal Blade bands. The roster was very, very cool back in those days.
Yep. I mean, and honestly, my true first impression was like, where did this kick-ass heavy metal album come from? Like it's supposed to be a doom album, but there's so many points in this where they're breaking down the door with these heavy metal riffs and like the speed and intensity, which is not too often associated with doom, which I think it's just the fact that this was so early on that there weren't these roadmaps that people felt like they had to follow. Trouble could just be Trouble and play what they wanted to play, and even on first listen, like the majority of the songs were starting to stick out with me. I mean, the tracks like Victim of the Insane, where they're balancing the fast and the slow, I was immediately like, wow, this is cool. And there was a very sinister sound. So I was definitely impressed, and this is definitely a classic that I've missed, and I'm finally happy to be digesting it and hopefully adding it to the roster real soon.
Right on. Kellen, first impression.
Yeah, I think re-listening to this, I am just kind of left with the impression that in 1984, I don't know how well established the American doom scene was, and in the sense of like a well-codified sound. There's a lot of traditional heavy metal on this record, and I'm always sort of caught off guard. It's interesting, like, because I kind of grew up in the digital era, the records that come after, so the Skull and Run to the Light seem to be the ones people would recommend when you're thinking about like a true doom album by comparison to Psalm 9. So I think I've spent more time with them, but to Logan's point about a couple of times on this record where it just feels like way more influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal than or American power metal for that matter, than just like a traditional doom. You compare this to something like Saint Vitus, which is so much in my mind rooted in like American doom and blues by comparison. So I mean, it's a classic band. I want to say when I got a chance to visit Jim in Florida, we pulled this aside, and I don't know if it was a different record, but he's like, you got to start with the first one if you want to pick one up. So when he pulled this, I was like, I know this is going to be a special band for him. I'm looking forward to this one.
All right. Well, for me, the history of it is a bit fuzzy. I remember Best of Metal Blade Volume 1 cassette tape I had and just wore the crap out of. It had some Trouble songs on it. Really liked it. I still think my first Trouble album was Run to the Light. Forever, I was telling Jim, that was my be-all, end-all Trouble album. I love that record. I think it's depressing as hell. I think it's so atmospheric. The lyrics, everything about that record. I love the cover artwork, everything. It's just a very special album. And this album I always liked. as the Skull. I like both of these records, but listening to this again this week, I'm just like, wow, this is a lot better than I remember. I mean, we just did a dive. I don't know. It's been a year, I guess, with Sue. So we went through all these albums. So it's been within a year since I've heard it, but it just kind of clicked a bit more for me. And the album first impression, for having a bit of distance on it, is this album starts off amazing. There's a couple of middle tracks that a step in quality for me, but I think it's a great record. Total classic, a lot of fun to listen to. Jim.
Yeah, man. My first experience with this record, like I like I said, I bought the 1990s self-titled, and then sought this out and found a German pressing of it from Steamhammer on CD. And dude, when the tipter kicked in, man, I was like, as much as I love, and I do, and I actually go back and forth on which one of these two are my favorite between the two, the 1990 and this one. But man, when I heard the tempter kick in, I was like, I'm in for something else. It took everything that I loved about that record, but like amped up the heaviness. This debut is really all about the heavy. There was no one in 1984 that had this guitar sound. No one.
No.
I mean,
such a unique as hell.
Yeah, unique as hell. Down tune, but combined with just like a crunch to end all wars, man. I mean, there's like a story goes that like James Hetfield sat on the side stage of Trouble trying to see what Rick Wartel's guitar settings were. You know what I mean? Like, he was a huge fan of Trouble, and why? Because it's a god-sized guitar sound, man. And from that first, like, I mean, to me, they take that Sabbath influence on the Tempter and make it 1,000 times heavier than Sabbath could have ever imagined. And then when they do the unexpected, they take that riff and they speed it up.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I don't give a damn. I'm going to try not to cuss too early this early on.
Yeah, we're often demonetized, and I have to contest it, and it's usually a week later. Anyway,
yeah, I'm going to wait till the end before the F-bombs come out. But yeah, I don't care what I'm doing or where I'm at. I'm banging my head, and that's what happened when I like revisit this record for this week. I just, like, as soon as it kicked in, I was at work. I just stood up and just banged my head throughout the whole song. I was like, I gotta do this. I mean, this song. I mean, it was hugely impactful for me and introduced me to what just force of nature that early Trouble really is. There are other stuff is, and there is plenty of mournful moments on this, but I think it's outweighed by the pure power. And I think that's kind of maybe what, Kellen and Logan are alluding to. There's a power and intensity of this that kind of belies the depressive nature of the later records. But in the 1991, I mean, the song Misery Shows on that album is extremely sad. You turn on narcotic depression. I mean, there's this recurring theme of sadness. And it's there on this one too, but this one is also just like brimming with intensity. And it is absolutely riff classic. I mean, some of my favorite riffs of all time are on this record. And that here many years later still are hugely impactful for me. So it's definitely one of my all-time favorites. And yeah, first impression was, I'm never going to be the same again.
And of course, none of us have really touched upon the uniqueness of Eric Wagner. I mean, not only is Bruce Franklin, the guitar tone, just God-sized guitar tone, you're right, but Eric Wagner's voice, wow. What a mournful, awesome voice.
It's sad, it cuts through,
yep.
And, you can always understand what he's saying. Like, there's none of this, like, what was that? I mean, he's one of the few, like, true metal singers that he doesn't get lost in the screams and everything else, where what he's saying is covered up and hard to understand. You don't need a lyric sheet with Trouble. Eric just has that kind of like high caliber vocal that completely complements the music. It wouldn't be the same without him, for sure.
100%. So you got a topic for us?
Yes, I do. So The question here is, when Trouble first arrived on the scene, they were labeled by some as white metal, a term they themselves disavowed due to their lyrics with Christian imagery. I personally always felt that Eric's preoccupation with religion was based more on a longing for peace promised yet never delivered upon, a feeling I personally relate to.
Oh, fuck.
Did Trouble's sometimes religious lyrical focus, which certainly wasn't always the case in their songs, but I digress, did their religious lyrical focus impact your initial experience with the band? And as a metal fan, are Christian tinged lyrics ever a deal breaker for you with bands in general?
Good question. Logan.
Yeah, so I guess first I have to kind of acknowledge where my roots are. I was definitely raised religious, nothing hardcore. I mean, I was Methodist, which is like every brand of Christianity, but the light version of that. But still, it was definitely a big part of my upbringing, and with that comes the Christian music, quote unquote. And I was always used to the the Christian rock stations, and even playing in a youth group band for a little bit in high school. So I'm definitely used to what Christian music could be like, and just growing up all around it, it's never necessarily put me off, but there's definitely a line that can be crossed when it comes to listening to really, I guess, specifically Christian music. It's like, are we writing this music from the Christian perspective and approaching it from just, normal everyday life from the potentially being a Christian, or are we preaching and trying to bring people to worship and bring people to, to the faith essentially? And that's when it crosses the line of like, oh yeah, I can appreciate this music as just someone enjoying someone else's perspective. And I mean, also I'm not a lyric guy, so lyrics are always like second hat. But typically, if the band is approaching Christianity from a very much a come to worship and like a eternal praise perspective, the lyrics are front and center. They want you to know it's the full focus of it, and it ends up sounding a bit hokey, a bit try hard, a bit cringy. I kind of brought two examples because I've like listened to a lot of Christian metal throughout the years. It used to be the one way I could like tell my parents it was okay that I was jamming like this really screaming stuff. It's like, oh, it's all about Jesus or something like that. I don't know. And they'd be like, oh, okay, I believe you. But the band White Cross, if you guys have ever heard this band, are an example of maybe the Christian metal getting a bit too preachy, a bit too high and mighty, and a little bit hard to digest. I mean, like, you just open up the booklet and the first line is, "I am overwhelmed at how God has carried us," and it just keeps going, and like all the songs are like, if you believe, home in heaven, Salt City, King of Angels. It just sounds like a Jesus culture album. It's just still good music, but it's just something that I can't get into. And then one of my favorite more modern bands, Extol, like progressive oriented death metal from Sweden. These guys do it right, man. Well, of course, the screaming vocals help, but you can still tell that they're Christian just because of the feel of the music. It feels oddly hopeful. It is not like dark all the time. I can definitely tell that there is, a religious nature to this piece of music, but it still works as, transporting me to their world, kind of. And this is a great album, very uplifting, but not hitting you over the head with a message that they they don't want you to ignore. So, and real quick, I can definitely acknowledge that what I'm saying makes me a hypocrite, because then I can get into a band that is singing about like pagan pagan religions, Satanism, all this stuff, and be like, oh yeah, this is awesome, this is great. The message is perfectly on point. It's not heavy-handed at all, and it's almost obnoxious how heavy-handed some of that music can be. But I don't know, the Christian metal can definitely come out a bit strong, especially if you're not looking for that. So, my 2 cents.
Kellen.
It's funny, as much as like that tag has followed this band, I never, in the way that white metal I think was intended to be used, I never heard them as that. As I'll just
It died on the vine pretty quick with them, but because they were like, yeah. And I think even Metal Blade even like put like a hype sticker of that on it, like originally. It was a bunch, but they were like, F that, so. Yeah.
Right. I don't know if that was an intent to try and sell or anything, but to your point about the sound of the lyrical content and the themes, I think are consistent in that you hear across the board with other Doom bands. I never listen to this record and feel like they're trying to convert me to Christianity, right? I think so. Just like, if you're trying to pull from parts of the Bible or a different religious text, in this context, the idea for me is to endure a life of suffering. I think that to kind of tailed a little bit of a side note, so be patient with me here. I was watching a film that was dedicated to Flannery O'Connor recently here in Kentucky. And there's a scene in the movie when she's talking about people are debating religion and so on and so forth. And she says, one of the lines that she had was, people think faith is this comforting, warm blanket, but it's really it's bearing the cross, right? So in this sense, we have this person who's supposed to be your savior, right? Doomed to this terrible, torturous end, right? And I think Doom has latched onto that part of Christianity as someone who has to like life as bondage, life as suffering. This sort of like attrition is part of human life, that you sort of slowly have to bear this weight. And that makes sense with the sound that they play, but also the lyrical content that corresponds with it. And I always hear trouble in that vein. So anyway, I never understood why people associated this band as trying to promote religion as much as they tried to sort of channel religious imagery in a way that made sense for Doom.
Did they ever make it a point in like the early years that they were Christian, like in the interviews or anything?
No.
They never ever said that they were a Christian band. There's actually a line on Psalm 9 where he says, we are not a holy band, but at least we try to serve as best we can. Sometimes I'd like to die. That's the line. And if that doesn't give you a clue into Eric's psyche, I don't know what. To me, again, like when I said in the question, I think he looked to faith, probably grew up with it, and it didn't bring the peace and contentment that it was promised. I like you, Logan, I was brought up very religious. In my case, though, it was super religious. I mean, it was Church of God, Holy Ghost, Holy Roller, all that stuff. So it was like, do what you're told or you're going to burn. Like that was every sermon, right? Mm-hmm. So, of course, I obviously went the opposite way. So, but being a metalhead and hearing this, I heard Eric struggle with his faith that you know what I mean? Like coming out of that and realizing slowly but surely that no one's coming to save you, man. And when you come out of a situation, whether it's like really intense Catholicism or really intense Southern Baptist or Pentecostal like mine, it's almost like you were kind of programmed into believing a certain way. And when you start to step out of it, because you see disappointment after disappointment, you're like, where's all this like God of armor that's supposed to protect me? Like all these bad things are still happening. Well, when you start to realize, the truth about it, which is that, hey man, no one's here to save you. That's really tough. And, there's this phase where you still kind of pull back onto this, you're walking away from it. You're embracing music. You're embracing, whatever it is you're getting into. In our case, metal. In Eric's case, metal. But you haven't completely let go of it, right? You know what I mean? Because you don't know what else is out there. You've never lived without a net. And that's what I hear in his lyrics. I hear that struggle. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, sometimes I want to die, man. Like, he's like, that's not a preacher. He's saying that, this is a guy that's struggling with losing his religion, man. That's what trouble is to me.
Right on.
Doom.
Well, for me, I was not brought up religious at all. Zero. We went to church for weddings and funerals. And it wasn't very, my dad didn't like going to that kind of stuff, so it was very infrequent. But for some stupid reason, our local college, 90.9 at WNMC, they had a really killer sick metal show. And the guy that did it moved on, and it was taken over by another person who was Christian, and she changed the entire channel over to Christian metal. And it felt like such a slap to the face. And the whole Christian metal thing, I don't know why it would make me so mad. It felt like, snake in the grass, trying to take something away from us, and this is ours. And the thing that made it worse was a lot of the bands sucked. At the time, in my youth, when I was younger, I thought all these bands were lame-ass ripoffs. The only way you could buy these things in town, there was a place called the Rainbow Bookstore. It was a Christian bookstore. You'd go in there, and they had a tape counter, a tape section, and they had all the Rex Records stuff, Believer, and Vengeance, you name it. It wasn't until I started picking up, like Believer. Wow. This Extraction from Mortality. What a killer album. Wow.
So good.
More early Mortification stuff. Wow. Okay. And then you get a little bit older, and I start to realize that if I'm going to get this bent out of shape about these guys coming in to metal and singing about God, why am I just as up in arms about the people that sing about Satan? Because it's all part of the theology. It's all part of the religion. So, what I just kind of like whatever. And I just started taking it as, music. And of course I got some friends that are very Christian, and, you talk with these folks and you kind of get their perspective and see where they're coming from. And why was I so bent out of shape about this stuff? I don't know. But, and I will agree with, I don't know who said it here, but when I was listening to Trouble early on, I wasn't thinking of them as Christian. It didn't feel the same. The music just had it was really good. It had a darkness to it. And I hate to say, cause looking back now, a lot of the bands that I used to hate, Christian bands, now I like them a bit more, cause a lot of them were just heavy metal bands. Oh, there's another one that sounds like a lamer, underproduced version of Judas Priest, or with a glammy type of singer. You go in and you pick up the tape. If you like My Dying Bride, you will like Paramecium. And, they're trying to bait and switch these kids. They're trying to steer them away from the secular path and get them, to the Word of God, which you're in a Christian bookstore. Of course, that's going to be the case. Why am I so offended? I'm in the lair of the enemy. I'm in there with my money looking for a Believer tape and going, what is this crap? If you like Metallica, you will like, whatever, Barren Cross or whatever. I'm just like, so I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, I mean, when I was younger, it was a big deal. It used to make me mad. It was mainly because my favorite metal radio show got changed over to Christian. Me and my friend would call them and request stuff that we knew, because my friend's girlfriend also had a radio show at the same college, and there was a metal section, but Lee she wasn't playing those records. So we would call and request songs from records like Nuclear Assault or Creator we knew were there. Oh no, those aren't here anymore. And we're like, you're lying, on the phone. It did. So, I mean, that probably had a lot to do with it, but yeah. Anyway, great question. Jim, do you feel like you got to answer it, or do you want to come back and put the ribbon on
I
it?
have a little more to say just about other bands. I already talked about Trouble. But for me, like, I kind of had a similar experience with Logan. I mean, I definitely started with secular bands, right? The first things I got a hold of back in, what was it, 83 or whatever, was like Rat, or I guess it was 84, like Rat, Round and Round album, Van Halen's 1984, which actually did come out in 83. Twisted Sister Stay Hungry, which was 83. Quiet Riot, Metal Health, 83. But my parents obviously flipped out, right? So and they were like, like, okay, this is happening. Our kids are into heavy metal, so they bought us Striper's debut, right? You know what I mean? And we saw what was happening
I
here.
had that too.
But I like it. To this day, I still do. Like, I mean, those guys are great guitar players, man. There's great riffs, great solos. Yeah, man, some of their lyrics are incredibly difficult to take, and their ballads are awful. But that is to say, though, that's just to say that there is some Christian metal that I used to like and I still do. Like we just mentioned, Believer. That's one band. I know someone in the chat was saying, yeah, Mortification sucks. I do like Scrolls of the Megaloth. I think that's a good album by Mortification. Vengeance Rising, those guys were good. And another band, Logan, similar called Baron Cross, they were cool. And we were talking about pre-strip offs, Messiah Prophet. Now that was dude on the cover, dude. It's this big, like, hulked out Jesus, like he's like all buff and everything. And he's got like a huge like Thor hammer, and he's hitting an anvil. I mean, like, what is more metal than that, dude? And it's
Jesus
called
was squatting the cross. I
If
guess.
it was Satan instead, it'd be a little bit
literally,
more
literally, the title track was "Jesus is Master of the Metal." So yeah, I've got that somewhere on CD, but no, man, I listen to, I can listen to Archgoat, I can listen to Striper, I don't care. You know what I mean? If the music's powerful enough, if it feels genuine, whatever you believe, I don't care. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, now I'm done.
All right. Well, good talk. Let's discuss the musicality and composition of Psalm 9. Logan.
Yeah, so I want to open by stating that, listening to this album kind of made that conversation we had a couple streams back about Altar of Oblivion and what is Epic Doom and not Epic Doom. It actually kind of made it click. Because I know, I think, Kellen, you made that point that the separation is, regular Doom still played around with that, like, Black Sabbath blues rock approach and just different, like, almost hard rock oriented sections in their guitar playing and how they would write songs, whereas the Epic Doom, we're just going straight towards like a more solid heavy metal backbone. And comparing this to like that early Candlemass stuff, I can definitely tell that this is kind of where the line was drawn, because this definitely has that blues rock and that Black Sabbath element and backbone to it. Like there's certain sections which makes me think of Master of Reality. This just definitely sounds like if Master of Reality was really just, on that same steroid stuff that Metal Jesus was on, this is what it would sound like, It's just beefed up and heavy as hell, man. So yeah, overall, I think as it's stated, that this album just feels important to that doom metal blueprint that so many bands have used since then. I mean, I think initially on that first listen, I was blown away by how heavy metal it sounded. Upon repeat listens, I realized how well they balanced out that heavy metal aggression with those slower doom elements on like the opening section of Tempter, and certain songs in the middle of the album, and the riffs and some of the songwriting, especially on the more heavy metal songs, they almost sound like speed metal thrash stuff. It's crazy, and honestly, I can't believe that this album was released in 1984, with just how heavy the tone of the guitars are and just the songwriting. So yeah, as I said, one of the strongest part about the album to me is just how well they balance out the slow doom and the fast-paced heavy metal anthems. It's like just perfectly set at odds with each other. And really, some of my favorite tracks are when they really go into that heavy metal pacing, like Assassin or Bastards Will Pray. But then when they're actually able to balance it out on tracks like Victims of the Insane and Revelations, those tracks just benefit perfectly because of how well they're balancing, these two at odds pacing and time signatures. So down to kind of dive into the performances of everyone. Eric Wagner's vocals are visceral and immediately catchy. They kind of do exist in that nasally realm, but I really like it, and it sounds like a more extreme successor to Ozzy Osbourne's vocals, if you will. And I think he adds a lot to the emotive feel of the music. And really, how you were describing his approach to this album, Jim, and just to Christianity in general was, yeah, pretty visceral and relatable. I'm gonna have to listen to all the music again with that in mind. The versatility of the guitars are extremely impressive. They range, as I said, from being just supremely crushing to like an extreme degree to like fast paced and, as I said, kind of like that speed metal riffage almost. Um, I think when they do slow down and have that bluesy element, that's when the production kind of helps. And I'll talk about that later, but it definitely lends itself to these beautiful, like, bluesy guitar solos and just guitar tracks that help to build atmosphere. So, yeah, due to the elements listed above and how the track list is organized, and man, this is just a very well composed album, and how it segues from slow to fast. It's just perfect. And I think you alluded to it, Marty, but I do feel like the first half outweighs the second half, and then it starts to kind of come to a halt as far as it was like killer track after killer track in the second half. But that's just a minor, gripe for track listing notes, if you will. But
Yeah.
a unique album for 1984, and just a well composed classic metal album, let alone a doom release.
All right, Kellen.
I don't know if I truly hear this record as a doom album.
It's tough. The doom back then is very ambiguous, I think.
Yeah,
it just is.
It is, and I think the subsequent records, it becomes a bit more like the identity gets worked out a little bit more in my mind. But I kept on wanting this to be a true doom listen, and it's just a great heavy metal record. That's kind of what I came away with. There's plenty of diversity on it in terms of the pacing and the playing, but I just really think it's a classic American heavy metal record from 1984. Definitely sounds like Metal Blade as well. Like, you're looking at the Bill Metoyer's production credits. All those Metal Blade bands from the early 80s. A lot, One Foot in Hell from Sirathongol is another one that comes to mind that he produced. So the songwriting here, like, I think it's varied. We don't get a whole lot of consistent band identity for me on this record. It kind of goes from, some of the tracks are decidedly slower and doomier, some of them, to Logan's point. I mean, the pacing of songs like Assassin, for me, that is 100% like an Omen song in my mind. Like, you could have put that on Battle Cry and it would make sense. So it just, I went into this listen trying to, with all the Christian imagery that works so well in my mind for doom, all that wound up hoping to find a true doom record, and it's really not there for me. It's just a great heavy metal record. I do want to take a quick moment to talk a little bit about, we aren't quite on production here, but the sound of this record, it is very unique. And to me, because it's kind of moving into production, but they have enough of the 1970s wrapped up in their sound that I think it serves them incredibly well in terms of like drum, bass, guitar production and voicing. This is like the way that you would hear a 1970s hard rock record produced, but with the musicianship and skill of a 1980s American heavy metal band. And that it completely shines. The tone of the guitar to the solo work that's on here. All of it sounds like it belongs from a 1970s era. So I'm kind of moving a little bit into production. So I'm going to stop myself here, but I would say overall the songwriting feels like they're sort of starting to form a greater doom identity, but still very much 1978 to 1982 is all over this record in terms of its music and metal influence.
That's because they started in '78.
But like, you know, I mean, like the sound of it, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't.
no, I know what you mean.
All right, Jim.
Yeah. So I think that these guys are the big four of doom. You know what I mean? You know, when we're talking about, you know, post Sabbath, you know, I always see I see Trouble, I see Candlemass, Pentagram, and for me, my least favorite of the big four, which is Saint Vitus. You know, and I think that, you know, these guys were out in the '70s, like Pentagram. Their first demo was 1980. I think it's okay that there's heavy metal on this. I think because if you helped create doom, you can be heavy metal as well. And I really do think they did. And but you know, to your point, I mean, yeah, you know, Assassin especially is a great one to call out for being like a straight that verse riff is a straight heavy metal riff, right? You know, not a doom riff. You know, and now you know, the tempo change of it gets is a and what the lead plays over it, it gets, you know, that section right there gets to me. Then it goes back up tempo again, and of course, Bastards will play. That's double bass. That's thrash all the way. You know what I mean? Or speed metal. You know what I mean? You know, probably more accurate to say that. But a darker, more sinister speed metal. Like it really is to me when I listen to Bastards will play. This is what speed metal would sound like if a doom band played it. You know what I mean? You know, it's got that Trouble effect on it. They somehow make an up tempo rolling double bass song sound dark. You know what I mean? And and you know, in a way that's like not like high pitched, high on the neck, kind of evil, screechy, but dark and gloomy sounding. And so it kind of harkens back to that. So I you know, hear from Trouble, you know, a lot of '70s isms that would slowly kind of take more shape over the course of their career, culminating into Manic Frustration, where they completely embrace, you know, '70s rock and '60s psychedelia and then make something out of it, but never losing that super, you know, high gain guitar tone that makes anything they play sound heavy, which is, I think, a token of their genius. I mean, you know, Bruce and Rick's guitar sound was just it's to this day it's amazing, and people all over the world, including myself, you know, tried to figure out how they caught it, and very few succeeded. I think Kirk from Crowbar gets close. He's a huge Trouble fan, and he's got that great crunch, and then when he's playing like his like doubled over leads, you know, you can certainly hear the Trouble love there. But back to Psalm 9. I mean, man, I literally some of my favorite riffs of all time are on this record. So yeah, I just when you listen, they're on Revelation, Life or Death. 2 minutes in, you know, that riff, that I mean, I just like, man, I just want to break. I just want to tear my room apart every time I hear that. And then as if you're like, wait, but we're not done. And then it's like they go into that classic Sabbath, like, we don't need no sympathy. I'm just like, ah. I mean, they just keep it coming at you, riff after riff after riff. And that's what this is about Trouble. I mean, this is a riff band fronted by an amazing singer that carries it all. I mean, it's like the whole package for me, man. So yeah, musicality and composition. I mean, to me, it's as good as it gets here. You know what I mean? I mean, these guys laid a blueprint for doom metal bands forevermore. You know, afterwards. You know, and you know, I think their influence can't be understated, and the memorability of their songs, you know, is I think the biggest testament to it. Because you know, I come back to these records and I remember every time change, every note, every word, and not just because of like multiple listens, but because man, these guys just write good songs, and I think because they are children of the '70s and they came up with that, you know, those earlier kind of proto metal styles, that's what they learned for first was songcraft, and the implementation of heaviness came later.
All right. For me, I think if you look at the track listing on this, for me anyway, they knew the best songs in the repertoire here. The Tempter, Assassin, Victim of the Insane. These three songs are exceptionally crafted songs. I like this whole album. I'm going to be a little nitpicky on a couple tracks moving forward, but doesn't mean I don't like the songs. There's a noticeable lull in the center of the album, but they are you can get a lot of mileage out of a great guitar tone, and man, they've got an amazing guitar tone. So you could just crunch and it would be killer. And but the songwriting, I really like that ambiguous. We mentioned it earlier, how people consider this doom. They're like in the group of doom bands, but man, you listen to this, there's a lot of head bangable tempos and parts here. There just is, like Kellen said, it really is at the core a heavy metal record. From a glorious era where a lot of bands coming out had their own sound and individuality. I mean, this is a band from the Chicago area. Not a lot of bands. There were some metal bands from Chicago, and there still are, but not a band that kind of had the caliber in the metal scene that Trouble did. And the fact that they sounded like nobody. Yeah, there's some Sabbathisms here and there, but there's a lot of other stuff too, and that guitar tone trumps a lot. And you got the musicianship behind it, but at the core, they wrote really good songs. There's a few songs on here in the middle where it seems like they were either early in the album cycle where they were trying to figure out where they were going, and then they arrived at songs like Assassin and Tempter and went, here it is. Or they were at the end of the album cycle where they're burnt out, creatively tapped. We put all this stuff into these 4 awesome songs. The rest aren't going to be as good. But having said that, I think the album is paced really well. There's a lot of excellent dynamics, and a lot of times I find myself so enthralled in the slower movement of a piece where there's a really great guitar foundation, heavy, sounds awesome, and then those solo or melody lines over the top, and Eric's selling it all. It just kind of pulls me into the vibe, and then when those heavy parts, head bangable parts hit, it's like, yes. Yeah, I didn't see it coming. There it is. This is doom I can get into. It's not always predictable. And Candlemass did it too. Tales of Creation. There's some head bangable double bass shit on that record too. Ancient Dreams and Tales of Creation. Both of those records have it. And I always appreciate that about Candlemass. When Candlemass kind of drank the Kool-Aid and leaned into the doom aesthetic, come on, it's been done. It's been done. So yeah, I think the songwriting, musicianship, composition on here, though it's a little shaky on a couple tracks. Oh, and I will say another thing. Run to the Light. I was so into this band, and then the self-titled came out. Excuse me, I'm a little sick, so I'm a little coffee. Sorry, everybody. I was pissed at the self-titled because it went from really great atmospheric, heavy, depressive doom to this stoner rocky kind of Sabbathy thing. Yeah. And I was so mad when I bought that tape and like, what the hell happened? But then I ended up listening to it and ended up loving it because it's catchy and a great, well-written album and that tone's there. But listening to this album this week, you've got songs on here. I don't remember which one it is. I think Fall of Lucifer and End Time. Oh, and Psalm 9. No. Well, the Ulysses song, which isn't on here. I'm hearing some of that 70s stoner doom groove in there, and I'm like, it was there all along. They decided to embrace it later. They kind of dropped the metal side a little bit and went more into their stoner roots. So yeah, to be reminded that the self-titled shouldn't have been a big surprise because it was here from the very first album all along. So anyway, that was a little off tangent. Sorry. Production. Let's talk about production. Logan.
Yeah. So to me, this is definitely a production from a time and place, and I think it's already been mentioned. Kellen, we're already talking about it. It definitely is Metal Blade, 1984. as I said, like this week, I was just getting flashbacks of preparing for that Omen album that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Just very similar in a couple respects with, how, kind of blew in a similar way. And then also just the sound and how the album was paced and structured just kind of felt similar. So this just has that feel of Metal Blade circa 1984, a true golden age, I think we can say. That I was not a part of, but the production is warm and roomy, and I think it really helps to make all the instruments in their own respective corners of the room. I do want to say that how they produced and where the guitar sits in the mix, like that rhythm guitar, that's impressive. I mean, I've said it before, for 1984, I feel like that's unheard of, just how much space it takes up and how heavy it is. And I think where it's placed really allows the vocals of Wagner to really take up the top section with that like nasally yell and croon that he has, and like an occasional moan too. It definitely helps, and it lets them kind of sit at odds with each other. But then also when they are doing like these bluesy leads and certain stoner elements, as you mentioned, Marty, I heard those too. I was like, this is definitely coming back around with Sleep in the 90s. But the production allows those elements to sit kind of on top of like the rhythm guitar. And then I haven't mentioned the drums and bass too much, but like the drumming performance especially, I think is quite impactful. And I don't know who the drummer is. I'm sure, Jim, you do, but that guy is just wailing on the kit. He is absolutely like providing a solid rock, just heavy backbone.
Jeff Olson.
Yep. Which I think he's on this Skull album too.
Yeah, there's a couple dudes from the original lineup. I think the bass player too, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. So yeah, and I think the drums really do help out a lot, and yeah, the production definitely helps present this as a time and place and as an immediate classic for the 80s, and from my perspective looking back on it.
Kellen, production.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about the bottom end on this record, because for its lack of clarity, I think you want to use Logan's phrase, impactful. But like when you get to songs like Assassin, when double bass is in here, there's a couple times where actually the guitar will cut out and you get a chance to glimpse at the bottom end of this bass tone. It's like it'll sort of reminds me of a great rock production in the sense it will like pressurize the room. You don't get the sort of clarity into like the leading edges of the bass guitar and the kick drums, but for all of that like bottom end weight, it's a great foundation for this guitar tone to sit on top of. And so I loved listening to it just because it sort of threw the rule book out of what a metal record needed to sound like in the era. And they just went for a sound that they felt best suited who they wanted to be and the kind of records that inspired them. And I actually enjoyed having like a 1970s production, which often sounded incredibly sort of, I don't want to say like underproduced per se, but there's all this sort of genre classification that happened with metal in the 1980s. And I think this kind of sounds like a great rock record, but with just the engine and meat of an 80s metal record. I do think, we got to my favorite track, Eric, I don't know if this is a performative quality or purely a production note, but the way Eric can cut through this mix, for as heavy as it is, I think he's incredibly visible and audible as a performer. So when he gets like a moment, for example, my favorite track on this, just kind of a spoiler alert, is the third track, Victim of the Insane.
Very cool song.
That chorus, when that moment feels theatrical, like you kind of stop your listening because I do feel like he's talking to me, like, right? Like is pleading, and in that moment, the mix feels like the C's part, and he is just sitting there by himself. And right, I think that's one of the more powerful moments on the course of this record. And the fact that they seized the opportunity to give his voice a highlight, like it's just smart producing for this record. So I loved the production. I loved the drum sound. I think everything sounded fresh, untampered with. So I've got nothing but great things to say about the production here. To Logan's note about like roominess or ambience, I don't know how they mic'd this record, but a sense of space, right, I think is another thing that it comes off, which I think is an attribute that you find in 70s rock records. So, I mean, I have a lot of good things to say about the production. I will pass it over to Marty and Jim and let them contribute here.
Jim.
Kellen, I couldn't have said it better myself, man. You pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. I mean, to me, it's the quintessential Doom sound. It's super low bass guitars. It's down-tuned guitars that ride on that bass and are made all the more powerful for it. It's drums that sound like drums, which you get a lot from the 70s and early 80s recordings. This isn't triggered crap. This is the way a drum kit naturally sounds like. And all of those things combined together, when you've got, a really low bass tone, when you've got, good guitars down tuned really low and focusing on those lower frequencies, drums that are real and natural sounding. I mean, you've got just a very warm, very comforting kind of a tone overall, which is, kind of like, antithesis to what like you think like Doom will do for you in terms of its like, obsession with like depressive, emotions and things like that. But the sound itself is very warm and comforting. And so, when you combine that with like the power of Eric's voice, which rides over all of this, like, low frequency maelstrom with this very enunciated high pitched vocal that has like very, controlled vibrato, like it just makes for a very potent mix that kind of, stays with you. And so, yeah, I absolutely have no complaints whatsoever about the production on this. Like, I wish more albums sounded this good. And honestly, like, between Psalm 9 and the self-titled, like, I felt like, The Skull and Run to the Light didn't have as good of a production. I felt like they were the guitars were a little bit thinner on those two albums. And
Run the Light had more of a dreamy
Run to
context.
Light was a glimpse towards the psychedelia, which would kind of like peek its head on more and more on later records.
Sparkle.
And but that sort of like low, really warm kind of like, 70s, but also just pure Doom sound really, really, I think permeates Psalm 9. And a little bit was recaptured for me on the self-titled. I felt like, even though there's a lot of brightness to that record, it's obviously Rick Rubin produced it. It's high dollar production, but it still has this super low end. I mean, the guitars just sound like on Psychotic Reaction, At the End of My Days, on those songs, it just sounds sludgy as hell guitar sound. So, they were able to kind of recapture some of that then. But yeah, again, I really like. I do wish that more bands had this, and I love the focus on those lower end frequencies, because not only when you're playing this music do I think it makes it stronger and more memorable, but there's something about it for me just as a listener when it rides like that spectrum of sound that it just like calms my nerves, man. Until an awesome riff comes up, but then I'm on my feet banging my head.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have much more to add here other than I look at, this is recorded track record, Los Angeles by Bill Metoyer, who was kind of the house producer for Metal Blade. You got Show No Mercy was recorded there, Awaken the Guardian, I mean, Omen stuff. I mean, all the Metal Blade bands were through the studio. And one thing you got to applaud Bill for is Trouble does not sound like Fate's Warning, does not sound like Slayer, does not sound like Omen. All these, I mean, this to me sounds like home, like nostalgia. This is the way metal. I mean, now I could be the old guy shouting at the clouds, this
Go.
all this new, here we go. All these new bands. They're all using the same plugins. They're all using the same amps. They're all using the same. It's all the same. Brick walled mastering jobs. I mean, it's just progress. It's modern, People are less concerned about their own sound and more concerned about, well, these bands sound killer. I got to have that killer sound too. So I listen to band like, this album, that guitar tone, Bill was given a gift to capture that tone. Trouble rolled into track records and sounded like Trouble. They're not, we want to sound like Fate's Warning. There's none of that here. This is us. This is what we do. You can hear everything. There's nothing out of place or wrong to detract you from anything other than the music, which, what a concept. Because, I mean, there's records that a snare sounds like crap and I focus on it. I just can't get away from it. That I think a producer or a recording engineer's job is to make sure everything is right, balanced, and not taking anything. It's embellishing the music, not taking away from the music. So this is a band that sounds like themselves with an amazing guitar tone, great drum tone. The bass cuts, I don't really notice the bass until I hear some fills, some licks, but it's there, and great production. It's an 80s production. I'm a child of that era. So yeah, it suits me well. Let's talk about least favorite tracks. Kellen, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, I kind of gave it away because I couldn't keep my mouth shut about how much I love that song. Yeah. So Victim of the Insane is my favorite track here. And I probably like, Revelation, and the closer, Psalm 9 are my favorite. I mean, to my mind, there's some of the more doomier moments on this record. And that's where I love them the most. That being said, like, there's a couple times like Bastards Will Pay, and when this band's at full tilt, they do that so well. There's no bad songs here. Like, this is an essential listen. So, just kind of, as I'm apparently doing now, I'm just skipping to the next section of our conversation. But yeah, there's really no bad tracks at all. For me, I just love this band a little bit more in their doomier moments. So when they can really slow things down and you get a chance for that guitar tone to sort of breathe and sink into the mix, I like it a little bit more. But yeah, no bad tracks here at all. Favorite by far, Victim of the Insane.
All right. Logan.
All right, yeah. As I said, my two favorite have to be the fast speed metal anthems, if you will. Like, Assassin is so fucking badass. That main riff, how Eric is like attacking the the verses essentially, and I initially, like, when I first heard it, I was like, oh man, this must be like from the perspective of a badass assassin, like, guy. But I think it is actually, more leaning towards that like Christian worldview itself. Like Eric lamenting these people who can like hurt and like not truly value a human life, and like lamenting, how vicious some people can be who might occupy that assassin role, which I thought was cool when I finally paid attention to the lyrics. But yeah, just the pacing of that. And then, man, Bastards Will Pay is like the close second to me. And I just love it when there's, because of your question, Jim, I was thinking definitely about this being a Christian band and hearing Eric coming, like, singing as potentially a Christian, but just hearing how pissed off and angry he is in that song just like made my day, thinking about like a Christian guy singing lyrics like, "You fucking bastards, you're gonna pay," like at the end. I eat that shit up, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, just pumped and ready to go. And then I'm with you, Kellen, on Victim of the Insane. Love that. I don't want to call out Tim in the chat or anything, but the whiny vocals are what makes it thematic, kind of is what you're saying, Kellen, that it's like, and there's keys. There's a lot of keys in that song too that add to like the ambience that really helps it feel so impactful. And then the final like great song I want to highlight is Revelation, and that's really where I think you can hear that stoner rock element a little bit. Like there's like these sections in the verse where it's like just the drums and the bass, and it sounds like what was going to happen in the 90s kind of. So love that too. Then as far as like least favorites, there's no bad song. I will agree that it for me it just slows down like the last, I guess, kind of last two. In Time as an instrumental is good, but I mean we're not talking on the same caliber as the other tracks. And the title track Psalm 9 is also good, but honestly I'm a little bit thrown off by that spoken word intro for some reason.
Go back and listen to that verse riff, dude.
Okay.
Go back and listen to the verse riff of Psalm 9. That is a God-sized riff, man.
I can take all right, well now I have to hear it just to hear what it sounds like. And then I know apparently it's not a part of the official album, but that initially when I was listening to this, I thought that the cover of Cream, the great the great adventure of brave and awesome Ulysses or whatever.
Oh, that's a Cream cover. No
it's
wonder
a Cream
that's.
cover. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
They
that
got-
wasn't on the original release, but on subsequent re-releases, they put that extra song on there. Yeah,
It was. So it was like up until I thought that was how they ended the album up until like literally probably an hour or two ago before I joined. I was like going through the archives and that's what they said. And I was like, okay, if you remove that, then it finishes up a bit stronger. So, but yeah, great songs all around.
All right, Jim.
first of all, I got to give mad props to Jay and Dan for both posting the chorus to Assassin at the same time. You go back to the chat, they're like, "You're a cold-blooded killer. He must be insane." And I think they even use the same amount of like A's in insane. That's amazing. I don't know if you guys colluded on that, but it is to be commended. Anyway, yeah, man. Obviously, I picked it. I love this album front to back. My favorite songs are "The Tempter." I mean, that song is just what an amazing doom song that's just heavy and intense and just that's everything I want. It's got these low end riffs. It just has a bounce to it. It sounds evil and sinister, and the slow parts, and then taking that Sabbathy style riff and then speeding it up to make it headbangable. It's just genius, man. You know what I mean? And Revelation, Life of Death, man. That riff in the middle of that song that I referenced earlier. I mean, it's just. I mean, and then it transitioning to an equally as good as riff. I mean, I just like, where did that even come from? I mean, like it's, to this day, I don't know where these guys came up with these incredibly heavy and memorable riffs, and it just like it gets me every time, man. So yeah, Tempter, Revelation, Life or Death, Psalm 9. I said the low again, like that main riff on the verse, man. I mean, there's again nothing like it. What is that? Like it's chopping a sequoia down like by hand. That's what that guitar sounds like. I mean, it's amazing. And man, I've got to get some defense on End Time here, man. That's one of my favorite instrumentals ever.
It's a great instrumental.
I don't like instrumentals mostly, man. That to me, they're usually just fodder. Most of the time when I hear an instrumental, I'm like, why isn't there lyrics on this? But in this case, man, like there's a riff on here. It's just shy of 3 minutes in, and it's like, and they just do this ascending kind of like chunk, and it's so amazing. And that's just one of the riffs on there. And that riff was actually ripped off by Type O Negative on one of their albums. I think on the one that was like the fake live album. And they play that same exact riff, but they just play it like a lot slower. So, dude, even the mighty Type O has some trouble love. I mean, it's just amazing. But yeah, and then another cool thing about End Time is near the end, like Kellen says, like when there's bass breaks on this album, you know it and you feel it. You got a good, that bass just like pushes, and the riff is just like no distortion, man. This is one of those bass sounds that doesn't need it. It's because the bass itself is so powerful. It's and then the riff comes in. It's just like it's just roof crushing metal, dude. It's amazing. It's got to be one of the most potent, instrumentals out there, and one of the things that makes for me this album as powerful it is. So, yeah. So for me, it's 1, 4, 7, 8. Those are my favorite songs. But yeah, there isn't a bad song on this record. I don't think I've ever just listened to 1 or 2 songs on this record. If I push play on the Tempter, I'm finishing with Psalm 9 every time.
Yeah. All right. Notes. Tempter, perfect leadoff track. It introduces their traditional doom side before picking up the metal tempo, so to speak, midway. I love the eerie intro and that mighty and amazing guitar tone that Bruce and Rick both have. That alone holds court over the rest of the album to unfold with many interesting twists and turns. Eric Wagner, the golden voice, of course. No one was like him, so unique. Great ear for excellent melodies and phrasing. Best doom singer ever, maybe. Assassin, I love that this album is still labeled as a doom album when tracks like Assassin roll out with headbangable riffs and upbeat tempos. It was so ambiguous back then as to what this even was. Is it doom? Not entirely. It's just a fantastic metal record that borrowed from many areas of early rock and metal. Assassin is an amazing track, so much life and flair. The pre-chorus is a massive hook, perfect. My favorite song on the album. Victim of the Insane, you got some organ tones that enter into the formula. It gives this a definite doom aura, slower tempo on this one to give the album a nice gift of dynamics and pacing. The keys offer an almost gothic atmosphere in the background, which isn't present on the rest of the record. I love how the track picks up the pace around the 425 mark, out of the blue. Ends the track on an epic feeling, which is nice, kind of different.
You're totally right, Marty. I love how that riff, like it does ascend. It ascends like and like and Eric's vocal over it. It's just perfect.
Yep.
It really sends home that lyric. We are just forgiven. You know what I mean? It just like you can feel like the energy, and it all comes together. Riff, vocal, bass line, like it. That's a great call out, man. The end of that song is just
really good.
Yes,
and
yeah.
it kind of comes out. It happens. All of a sudden, it's happening. It's like, wow, where did this even come? I like that. It fits. It flows. I didn't expect it coming. That makes it exciting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of doom you can't say is necessarily exciting. The riffs combined with Eric's vocals make this one a darker track that feels more like a deep cut that you can't wait to get to on the album. I mean, even though it's only the third song. Revelation. Yeah, I mentioned this before. I never really realized, but the groovy verse riff is foreshadowing to when they embraced this 70s or 60s groove style later on the self-titled album. It makes the self-titled feel much more natural of a progression, which I didn't think about when it came out. It's a good song, but my least favorite on the album. They have the feeling and the groove, but the main riff to the song feels a bit undercooked to me. Good middle section of the song, though. Bastards Will Pay and The Fall of Lucifer, both good songs, but the guitar parts feel abnormally simplistic, if not common for the time. The album starts off so amazingly with the masterful songwriting. These two feel like early tracks in the album process where they haven't found their way yet, or, like I mentioned, they're late in the process and they suffer from idea burnout. I don't know. The solo work and Eric's vocals carry these two tracks across the finish line. End Time, great instrumental track. Feels more exciting and mysterious as to where it's going to go. The time signature shifts, more complex riff ideas. It's a great, interesting, and proper instrumental. I see why you like it, Jim, because it goes somewhere interesting. Psalm 9, great song. Chorus carries so much feeling and weight, which this band are great at, and they get better at as they go. Trouble digs deep into their heavy side. Palm muted crunch riff that ends with a classic Trouble-styled lick before the track picks up the tempo mid-track. You can envision heads lining the front of the stage, all banging in unison. So, yeah, and I also threw the Tales of Brave Ulysses. I didn't realize it was a Cream cover, although it was very familiar sounding. But yeah, I mean, I complain on a couple tracks here, but I still like those songs. I just noticed a quality shift about the that 3-track run in the middle of the record. Judgment, final thoughts? Kellen.
Essential listening. Go listen. If you don't own it, you should own it. I think, I'd make sense for Marty. You're like, not so much into traditional doom all the time. It kind of gets boring.
I still like it.
I need a little bit more shift in sort of the pacing. This is the perfect album for you.
Yeah.
You're a Doom fan who's listening, wants a little bit more, up pace. Check it out. You're a traditional heavy metal fan who's interested in a little bit of a heavier sound. Go check it out. Like, this is just a classic record for me, and it's going to appease a lot of different people. If you're unfamiliar with this band, this is a great place to start. Yeah. I mean, I have nothing bad to say about this record. Perfect record.
Logan.
Yeah, I mean, basically agree with Kellen. Essential is the one word to describe it, and I'm glad that I now have experience with this, and I will definitely be picking this up for the collection. Honestly, I think I mentioned it earlier. Very similar to reviewing that Omen album. I mean, I immediately could tell this is a genre builder in the realm of metal. It feels important and influential, and I can easily list a ton of albums and bands that really base, either their whole sound or just elements on sounding like this album. Like, as I said, I heard Altars of Oblivion in this. I think it's also historical because of that Metal Blade connection, and also because of the whole, white metal tag that they had, which, to quickly weigh in on that again, I am really glad that they themselves rejected that as a tag, and that it never really caught on to be an actual thing, because that just seems like a lazy, not necessarily musical oriented tag to throw on to people. Similar to like calling stuff Viking metal or pirate metal, So yeah, the whole white metal thing was a weird flash in the pan, but they pushed some boundaries and legitimately, I thought, treaded new ground. Which I guess back in 1984, it's easier to do that.
Less bands, yeah.
A lot less bands. As you said, they were on Metal Blade, and no other band sounded like them, and all the bands sounded separate from each other. Truthfully,
there was a Metal Blade feel, but all the bands had their own style.
And I guess a real quick question, because this is me, approaching Trouble from the 2010s really and onward. Do you think they're appropriately revered and respected in the realm of metal for what they did? I mean, I missed listening to them. Like, are they kind of an underrated band? I feel like they are. That was one of my takeaways from.
They felt like they were getting pretty big when they signed to Def American.
They got the Rick Rubin. They got the Rick Rubin.
Yeah, they got that Rick Rubin bump. They're on MTV a lot. I don't know. It seemed like that self-titled album was kind of a big deal for them.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know. They just never felt as like, even Candlemass was overshadowing them in my worldview of metal.
I think that's because after Manic Frustration in '91, like, they started to kind of fall off. Plastic Greenhead is a great record, but it's not nearly as good as that initial run from Psalm 9 to Manic. And then it was kind of the beginning of the end for them. So where I think that Candlemass was more consistent and in long term, and Saint Vitus continued to put out quality albums. So again, I'm not super into them. Like it kind of stuck around. But yeah, I think because you being a younger metal fan, they weren't as visible. You know what I mean? But older Heschers like myself and Marty, like, again, these guys will be, and always have been essential.
That's what I was wondering. Like, even Cathedral felt a bit more like visible and was easier to get into, and people were talking about them more than Trouble.
Which Lee Dorian is a Trouble fan.
Oh, I could definitely tell.
You think Cathedral's easier to get into? I do protest.
I don't. I don't.
If you like Muppet singing, that's cool.
Yeah.
Fozzie Bear on vocals.
Well, hey,
waka.
I have never heard that, Marty, but I love it. That is awesome.
I mean, I guess my follow-up to that would be like, I do think, for example, like Saint Vitus or Candlemas had a career later on into the 90s that felt at least closer to their iconic era. I feel like Trouble has this amazing timepiece, and then they never really kind of discover it in the same way that there's that classic run was established. Where like you can look at, we covered, you could say like Born Too Late, 84, but then we covered Die Healing, which is 95, which are another St. Vitus record much later in their catalog that I think is also easily revered. I don't think Trouble has the same sort of relationship. So
I will say I remember getting Plastic Green Head as a promo when it came out, and it was during the era where, death and black metal was taken off, and there was like all gothic metal, and no matter how intense music had gotten, I still wanted to listen to that promo. I'm like, oh, they had their own sound. They weren't competing within that realm, and they weren't really affected by that realm, even though they were on Century Media at that point. I think my interest anyway, I'm only coming at it from my perspective. I still wanted to hear them. I liked the record. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I thought it was a good record.
I like Plastic Green Head. I own it, but I don't. Out of all these, it's the one I go to the least. Even though Mr. Green Man, the opening song is just it's absolutely perfect Trouble. But from there afterward, like the rest of it's a lot, for me, more forgettable. But so that kind of and then I didn't even buy the stuff that came after it. So that kind of gives you an example. So it's like, but if you're like, if you dig deeper into like, the bands that came later, what were they listening to? They were listening to Trouble. They were listening to Pentagram. They were listening to Saint Vitus. And
a band like Trouble's always going to be doomed for the fact that see what I did there. They're always screwed for the fact that they're a niche type of band. They're not the flavor of the month. They're gonna appeal to the the doom heads of the world, the Pentagrams and the Saint Vitus. I mean, that's the realm, the Candlemas people in the 70s loving doom folks. So you start whittling down the popularity. The doom and the epic doom and that stuff is a very small branch of metalheads at large. It just is, and it's a tough road to hoe. And when you jump into wanting to start a band like this, you got to realize you're not going to be world rocking. I mean, the biggest band of this ilk is Candlemas. Yeah. They went on tours with, death and thrash bands back in the day. They had enough, the Messiah stuff had enough dynamics and speed to compete if they wanted to, but people respected them for the talent and uniqueness of it and their singer, that it didn't matter. It was just metal. It wasn't necessarily, this is a doom band. It was, it's a killer metal band. Anyway, we're off topic here.
Sorry. My bad to derail it. But I guess so I can put a quick rating on it. I said very, definitely as a doom fan, heavy metal fan, and stoner doom fan, this was so easy to seamlessly digest and put into my world. The sound is iconic. The individual songs are memorable. Another album I'm kicking myself for not owning and hearing before this. So easily a strong 8 to a 9 out of 10. So great album. Good pick, Jim.
Hell yeah. Jim.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my pick, and I'm sure, and I wear my emotions on my sleeve when it comes to Trouble and most things in life, but especially a band like this. So yeah, this album is a perfect 10 out of 10 for me. It has literally not left my rotation since the first time I heard it, many years ago. And it's because it's just frankly, it's just that good, man. It's, to echo what everyone has said so far, it absolutely is essential, and not just as, both Marty and Kellen have said tonight, this isn't just a Doom album. It's really just an amazingly good metal album. And it shows the potential of like what metal can be. Like it's all here. So.
Agreed. Good pick. Myself, it's, if I take the nostalgia factor away from it, it's an 8 out of 10. I think it's a great record. The middle section's a little step down from the way the album starts, but it ends well. I don't know. It's a solid 8 out of 10 record for me. Great record. It's been fun revisiting the album this week. Yeah, great. So that's it. Thank you everybody for joining us. But before we go, we have to see what we're doing for next week here. And Kellen is it. What do you got for us?
Yeah. I'm going to pick a death metal record. Haven't picked one in a while. So, this was of one of my, I guess, favorite bands from my death metal era. So this is Forever Underground from Vital Remains.
All right.
Ooh, Vital Remains. All right.
I haven't spun that one in a while. Nice.
I don't think I've even heard that one, but
it's good.
I haven't.
Yep. Nice. Yep. I got the one with the wolf on the cover, howling at the moon. Which one is that one?
The black metal cover.
Into Cold Darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the Cold Darkness. Yeah. Love that one.
Sweet. Yeah, show notes. No Alan again this Friday. He is still out of power. No power. So myself and Bill thus far, there's going to be another guest or two. We're going to be covering electronic elements in metal, like industrial metal. It's not really a topic Alan would be super psyched to talk about. So we're going to be showing stuff with drum machines and synthesizers mixed in with the metal. So should be a fun one. I know Eric Bauer is going to join us at some point in the evening. He has to work late, but there's going to be one other guest, and we'll see who I can get nailed down for that in the meantime. But that's it. Oh, there was a Black Dahlia Murder review posted today that Melanie did. Kind of her personal feelings. She's a big fan of this band, so it's pretty personal review for her. So go check that out. That posted today. There's 4 more reviews coming. I was going to edit one tonight, but I'm out of gas. I'm done. So they'll be coming throughout the weekend. What's been going on? What's going on with you guys? Kellen, you got something coming up?
Yeah, I've got a couple ideas floating around here. One of them was to record a review, but I think I might actually, cause you to pass out this weekend if I throw another review on your deck. So,
oh no, go for it. No,
okay.
I love having stuff in the queue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I've got actually 2 Doom albums that I'm looking forward to. So one is there's an upcoming Capilla Ardiente record, which is a Chilean Doom band that I really dig. And then this past week or two, a new Gates of Slumber is also on the way. So I will get working on those.
Logan, what you got going on? You just put up a nice High on Fire deep dive on your channel. Anything else coming?
Yep. So yeah, if anyone's interested, go check out the High on Fire with Chris Depeche Commode.
Which is the best YouTube channel name ever. Depeche Commode.
Oh,
perfect.
Yeah. Chris wins the contest for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to work on another video, hopefully to come out by the end of this week or the weekend, about 2004 metal albums, which might be bigger for the millennial generation than maybe a different era metal fans. So we'll see how that goes.
Right on. Jim, anything coming up?
No, man. You know me. I ain't got nothing going on. I should really do more to push my little tape label, but I've just been super lazy. I have got some orders here lately, so that's cool.
Sweet. Nice. Good. Awesome. Well, that's it, everybody. Thanks again. Good turnout tonight. It was good seeing everybody. Thanks for spending your Wednesday night with us. We'll see you Friday, and please go subscribe to all these gentlemen. Links in the description to their stuff. So Cheers. We will see you later. Have a good night.